Sisters to the second teaching of lust, sex, and marriage. That's lust, sex, and marriage. We're only interested in the truth on this channel. And so I ask you, my brothers, to keep me in your prayers as we go and we look at the life of David and how he went into Bathsheba and he fell. My brothers and sisters, I want to make one thing clear. The Bible asks the question, can a man take fire in his bosom and don't be burned? I don't care if you go to church. I don't care if you don't go to church. The bottom line here is that God gave us instructions. God has a standard, and God's standard must be followed. The bottom line is, my brothers and sisters, this struggle, this sexual struggle, is not only, this don't only happen to people in the church, it happened to people outside the church. You see, my brothers and sisters, the only way around this, the only way to rid yourself, my brothers and sisters, is to follow God's command and his instructions as it relates to sex, lust, and marriage. And so let's take a look at 2 Samuel chapter 11. Let's take a look at 2 Samuel chapter 11. And what we're going to touch on today, we're going to look at a great man, a man named David, the man who Jesus, the bloodline that Jesus came through. But even though he was a great man, David still fell to lust. And so you see, my brothers and sisters, that should be a warning to us, that I don't care how great you think you are. I don't care how great, how much you think you're saved. I don't care how much you think that you're unsaved. My brothers and sisters, this is a problem that plagues all of us. And you see, my brothers and sisters, what we have to do to understand how to handle this problem, we have to seek God in his righteousness. And so you see, once we seek God in his righteousness, we'll get instruction, my brothers and sisters, of how to handle this issue. So what we're going to do, we're going to look at 2 Samuel chapter 11, starting at verse 1 through 5. You see right here, my brothers and sisters, this is where the notorious moral lapse of David happened. And it starts in verse 1. It says, "It happened in the spring of the year, and in the time when the kings go out to battle, that David sent Joab and his servant with him, and all Israel. And they destroyed the people of Ammon and besieged Rabbah. But David remained at Jerusalem." In verse 5, in verse 2 it says, again, all my readings will be coming from the New King James Version. And it says, "Then it happened one evening that David arose from his bed and walked on the roof of the king's house. And from the roof he saw a woman bathing, and the woman was very beautiful." So here, my brother, you see David caught a whiff of a beautiful woman bathing from the roof of his palace. And you see, my brothers and sisters, it's not the first look that always get us. It's that second look that always mess us up. And in verse 3 it says, "So David sent and inquired about the woman. And someone said, 'Is it not the Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam, the wife of Uriah the Hittite?'" You see, my brothers and sisters, Uriah was one of the great, a man who, in terms of this battle experience, he was a good soldier. He was a fighter. And so he was in David's army, but he was at the forefront, my brothers and sisters. He was fighting, you see, in a war. And so what happened in verse 4, it says, Then David sent message and took her. And she came to him and lay with her, for she was cleansed from her impurity, and he returned to her house. So let's look at this now. Let's look at this. Excuse me. David inquired and found out that this woman, Bathsheba, was the wife of a Hittite. And my brothers and sisters, what David did, David as a king sent message to the woman and said, "Listen now, come here now. I want to be with you." And so what David did, David lay with another man's wife. And so, my brothers and sisters, in verse 5, the problem is, you see, after David lay with a woman's wife, with another man's wife, the woman that just didn't walk away and nothing happened. What happened in verse 5, my brothers and sisters, is what happened to a lot of young men, a lot of young women today. You see, a one-night stand hand out into be more than like a lifelong stand. Because you see, my brothers and sisters, in verse 5 it says, "And the woman conceived. So she sent and told David that I'm with child." So here David, my brothers and sisters, wanted to be with this woman, laid with this woman that wasn't his wife. And so, lo and behold, this woman got got pregnant. And so you see, my brothers and sisters, by this woman getting pregnant now, it's going to cause all kind of problem in David's life. Just like in our lives today, my brothers and sisters, we may go into a bar, we may go into a church and start lusting for something that is not ours. And you see, my brothers and sisters, one thing leads to another. And before you know, you hitch up into something that you don't want to be in, my brothers and sisters. But here it comes, here it comes. Let's take another look at David. In chapter 11, verses 6, you see, my brothers and sisters, you see, whenever we get caught up in this situation, you see, our minds start to think, and we have to come up with a plan to rid ourselves of this situation. You see, in verses 6 through 13 of 2 Samuel chapter 11, the king now have to put a plan in place to cover his tracks. In verses 6 it says, then David sent to Joab saying, send me to Uriah the Hittite. And Joab sent Uriah to David. In other words, here David now sent for the husband of Bathsheba, because you see, David is putting a plan in place, and that plan in place that David is trying to put in is to cover his own tracks. This is David, my brothers, who was appointed and anointed by God. It just goes to show you, my brothers and sisters, I don't care who you are. You see, my brothers and sisters, once in a while we will lapse in our thinking. Once in a while we will lapse in what we do. And before we know it, my brothers and sisters, you'll find yourself in problems. In verses 7, when Uriah had come to him, David asked how Joab was doing, and how the people were doing, and how the war prospered. You see, my brothers and sisters, David really didn't care too much to hear from Uriah in terms of what was going on with the war. What David was trying to do, my brothers and sisters, from verses 6 through 13, is to cover his own tracks. In verses 8 it says, and David said to Uriah, go down to your house and wash your feet. So Uriah departed from the king's house, and a gift of food from the king followed him. But Uriah slept at the door of the king's house with all the servants of his lord, and did not go to his house. So here, my brothers and sisters, stopping in verse 9, my brothers and sisters, David put a plan in place to cover his lapse of lust. But my brothers and sisters, in verse 10, you see, the plan is not going to work. In verse 10 it says, so when they told David that Uriah did not go to his house and to go sleep with his wife, David said to Uriah, did you not come from a journey? Why did you come? Why did you not go down to your house? In verse 11, Uriah said to David, the ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents, and my lord Joab and the servants of my lord are encamped in the open field. Shall I go to my house and eat and drink, and to lie with my wife? As you live and as your soul live, I will not do these things. Excuse me, my brothers and sisters. The bottom line is, Uriah said, no way. I am not going to go down and lay down with my wife. I'm not going to go do these things. Because you see, my brothers and sisters, he's saying to David, my man, my fellow comrades, they're out there fighting. I am not going to come home and go lay with my wife while these men were out there fighting. You see, another thing here, my brothers and sisters, this man was a true soldier. You see, he was not just a half soldier who didn't want to be at war. He was fighting, and he knew what he was fighting for. You see, because he says here, the ark and Israel and Judah are dwelling in tents. You see, he said the ark of the covenant, the ark is dwelling in tents. I'm not going to come here and go lay with my wife. I got other things to do. I got to defend this master plan. And so in verse 12, then David said to Uriah, wait here today and also tomorrow. I will let you depart. So Uriah remained in Jerusalem that day and the next. Verse 13, when David had called him, he had and drank with him, and he made him drunk. So here David the king, who was trying to cover up his track, now tried to make the husband drunk so he could go and sleep with his wife. And so even when he was drunk, even when he got drunk, Uriah refused to do that. My brothers and sisters, you see, once you find yourself in problems, now David, once David